My father used to say there are two kinds of people in Texas. People who talk about what they're going to do. And people who do it. Damon was always the first kind. He could sell you a vision of something, a business plan, a handshake deal, a future, in a way that made you feel the sun on your face before you'd even stepped outside. He was the best talker I've ever known in my life, and I grew up around cattle auctioneers, so that is saying something real. I was always the second kind. Which is why, on a Wednesday morning in February of 2023, when my brother walked through the glass doors of First National Bank of Kerrville, Texas, with a cashier's check for $1.15 million in his hand, his half of the proceeds from the unauthorized sale of our parents' ranch that I had not agreed to and had not signed for, I was already inside. I had been sitting in the branch manager's office for 45 minutes. I had brought a folder. And when Damon saw me stand up on the other side of that glass partition, he stopped walking so suddenly that the woman behind him walked directly into his back. He dropped the check. It fluttered to the floor of the bank lobby, and we looked at each other across that space, my brother and I, the last two Donovans, standing in the bank our father had used for 40 years, and I thought about something my daddy used to say. In Texas, you never draw first. You draw right. I had drawn right. Part 1, The Betrayal. My name is Clare Donovan. I am 44 years old, and I grew up on a cattle ranch in the Texas Hill Country, outside Kerrville, in a place that most people who didn't grow up there would call beautiful and most people who did grow up there would call home in a way that has no synonym. The Donovan Ranch was 2,300 acres of cedar and limestone, rolling hills, a creek that ran year-round in good seasons, and the kind of sky at night that people from cities drive 2 hours to see. My grandparents had bought the land in 1959. My parents, Frank and Loretta Donovan, had worked it their entire adult lives, cattle primarily, some hay production, a small but loyal hunting lease operation that brought in reliable income every deer season. It was not a glamorous life. It was a real one. I am the younger of two children. Damon, my brother, is 4 years older than me. And if you're already sensing a pattern from the other stories you've heard, the charming older sibling, the reliable younger one, the favoritism, the slow betrayal, I want to tell you that our story is both similar to that pattern and different from it in ways that matter. Because my parents were not naive about Damon. They loved him, God knows they loved him, the way you love someone who has cost you more than they've given back and you love them anyway because they're yours, but they were not blind to what he was. My father, Frank Donovan, was a quiet, observant man who had spent his life reading cattle and weather and land, and he read people the same way. He saw Damon clearly. That's why he wrote the will the way he did. When my parents died, my mother in 2018 from a stroke, my father 2 years later in 2020, his heart giving out on a cold morning in November, the way ranch men's hearts sometimes do, they left the ranch jointly to Damon and me. 50-50. Equal shares. But my father had also left specific instructions, drafted with his attorney of 30 years, a methodical man named Roy Tipton in Kerrville, about what joint ownership meant. The instructions were clear: any sale of the property required the written, notarized consent of both owners. No exceptions. No workarounds. Both signatures, both notarizations, documented and witnessed. My father knew his son. He built the fence before the cattle got out. For 2 years after his death, Damon and I operated a kind of uneasy shared ownership. I was on the ranch, managing the lease operation, maintaining the fencing and infrastructure, keeping the books. Damon was in Austin, where he'd lived for 15 years, cycling through business ideas with the particular energetic restlessness of a man who is always about to make his fortune and never quite does. He called periodically. He visited at Christmas, sometimes. He asked, twice in 2021 and once in 2022, whether I'd consider selling the ranch. Both times I said no. The ranch was my home. It was where I lived and worked. It was where my parents were buried, in the small family plot on the North Ridge that my grandfather had started in 1971. It was not, to me, an asset to be liquidated. It was the thing itself. Damon heard my no both times and said he understood. He sounded like he meant it, which was always his gift. He did not mean it. In September of 2022, without my knowledge, Damon contacted a commercial real estate broker in San Antonio named Philip Graves and listed the Donovan Ranch for sale at $2.4 million. He signed the listing agreement as sole owner. In November of 2022, 2 months later, he accepted an offer of $2.3 million from a buyer I'll call the Meridian Land Group, a private real estate investment company out of Dallas that was buying hill country acreage for a combination of hunting resort development and land banking. He signed the purchase agreement. In December of 2022, at a title company in Kerrville, 30 minutes from the ranch, in the town where our family had done business for 60 years, a closing was conducted on the Donovan Ranch. 2 signatures appeared on the deed transfer. Frank Donovan Jr., Damon, and Clare Marie Donovan, me. Except I wasn't there. I was at the ranch, 45 minutes away, on a Tuesday afternoon in December, mending a section of fence along the south pasture with a pair of pliers and a spool of barbed wire, the way I spent a lot of December afternoons. My signature, my full legal name, in the handwriting of a document, had been forged. I did not find out about any of this until January 14, 2023, when I received a certified letter from the Meridian Land Group informing me that as co-owner of record of the recently transferred property at Rural Route 4, Kerr County, Texas, I was entitled to my 50% disbursement of the net proceeds, and could I please contact their closing coordinator to arrange receipt of my check for $1.15 million. I read that letter standing at my mailbox, in 38-degree January air, wearing my father's old work jacket. I read it twice. Then I went inside and called Roy Tipton. Part 2, The Fall. Roy Tipton had been my father's attorney for 30 years and mine, by extension, since I'd taken over managing the ranch's legal affairs after my father's death. He was 72, slow-moving, and absolutely ferocious when it came to property law, which in Texas is not a casual subject. I read him the letter over the phone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claire, don't touch anything. Don't call Damon. Don't contact the title company or Meridian. Don't do a single thing until we talk in person. Can you be in my office tomorrow morning at 9? I was there at 8:50. Roy had already pulled the Kerr County property records by the time I arrived. He turned his monitor toward me across the desk. There it was. The deed transfer. Recorded December 19, 2022. Both signatures. Both notarizations. I looked at my name on that document for a long time. My signature, the real one, has a particular characteristic that developed when I was in high school and that I've never changed. The C in Claire loops back under the L in a way that's distinctive, almost like a backward curl. I've had people comment on it. It's mine in the way a fingerprint is mine. The signature on that deed did not have the loop. It was close. Whoever had done it had tried, the general shape was right, the slant was right, the flow was practiced. But the loop wasn't there. "That's not my signature," I said. Roy nodded slowly, already knowing what I was going to say. "No," he said. "It isn't." He explained the situation in the precise, unhurried way he explained everything. What had happened was a felony. Specifically, under Texas law, forging a property deed was a third-degree felony, 2 to 10 years, that could be elevated to a second-degree felony given the value of the property involved. The notarization was also fraudulent, which implicated the notary in a separate offense. "We have several paths," Roy said. Criminal complaint with the Kerr County Sheriff. Civil suit for conversion of your property interest and fraud. Or both, sequentially. "What do you recommend?" "Both," he said. "But sequenced carefully. And Claire, before we do anything official, I want a forensic document examiner to look at that signature. Not because I doubt you. Because we want this to be airtight before we put it in front of a judge or a DA. I asked the question I'd been turning over since the mailbox. Where is the money right now? Roy checked the closing documents. The net proceeds, after broker fees, title costs, and taxes, had been split into 2 cashier's checks at closing. one for each owner of record. My check, for $1.15 million, had been sent certified mail to the ranch, which was how I'd received the letter. Damon's check, for the same amount, had been picked up at the title company at closing by Damon himself. "He has the check," I said. "He has the check," Roy confirmed. "But a cashier's check of that size, from a transaction this traceable, is not something you can easily move or spend without a paper trail. He'll need to deposit or cash it." "He'll go to First National," I said. "That's where our family accounts are. That's the only bank he's ever used in Kerrville." Roy looked at me over his reading glasses. "Claire," he said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said, "that I want to be in that bank when he walks in." Roy was quiet for a moment. "Let's build the file first," he said. "Then we talk about timing." The next 3 weeks were some of the most focused of my life. Not emotional, focused. There's a difference. My emotions were happening somewhere underneath the work, but I'd grown up in a family that handled hard things by handling them, and this was the hardest thing I'd ever had to handle. There was grief in it. I want to name that plainly. Damon was my brother. He had stood at my mother's grave. He had called me, crying, the morning after my father died, and it had been real. I know it had been real. Whatever else he was, whatever the greed and the recklessness had built him into, there was a real person under it who had loved our parents and lost them the same as I had. That grief didn't change what he'd done. But it meant the next few months cost me something beyond the legal and financial. I was losing my brother too. Whatever happened next, the version of our relationship that had existed, strained, imperfect, but real, was over. I didn't let myself sit in that for long. There wasn't time. Part 3, Discovery. The forensic document examiner Roy brought in was a woman named Dr. Sylvia Marsh, based in San Antonio, who had spent 20 years working signature and handwriting analysis for federal and state courts across Texas. She examined the deed signature under magnification, compared it to exemplars of my genuine signature pulled from various legal documents Roy had on file, and produced a written report within 10 days. Her conclusion: the signature on the December 19 deed transfer was, to a reasonable degree of professional certainty, not produced by the same individual who produced the exemplar signatures. Specific indicators included pen pressure inconsistencies, the absence of a characteristic subloop formation in the initial letter, and tremor patterns inconsistent with the natural flow of the exemplar writer. In plain language, it was a forgery. Documented, analyzed, and certified by a court-qualified expert. The notary was easier to unravel than I expected. Roy subpoenaed the notary's journal. In Texas, notaries are required to maintain a record of every notarization they perform, including the identification presented by the signer. The journal entry for December 19 listed a Texas driver's license number as the identification used to verify, Clare Marie Donovan. Roy ran the license number. It was not my license. It was a license issued to a woman named Carol Martin, from Houston, who happened to share enough physical characteristics with me, brown hair, similar height and age range, that a distracted or complicit notary might not look too carefully. The notary's name was a man named Terry Bowles, who operated a mobile notary service out of Comfort, Texas. When Roy's investigator contacted him, Bowles immediately became extremely cooperative, which is what people do when they realize they're looking at a felony charge and someone is offering them an off-ramp. Bowles said he'd been hired by Damon for the closing. He said Damon had told him his sister couldn't attend in person due to a family emergency and that she'd send a representative with her ID. He said the woman who presented the ID matched the photograph well enough that he hadn't questioned it. He said he'd been paid $800 in cash for the job, double his normal rate. He said he was very, very sorry. Roy secured his cooperation as a witness. The picture was now complete. We had the forged signature, documented by an expert. We had the fraudulent notarization, with the notary's full cooperation. We had the deed transfer recorded under false pretenses. And we had a cashier's check for $1.15 million sitting somewhere in Damon's possession, proceeds of a property he had sold without legal authority to sell. Roy filed a formal report with the Kerr County Sheriff's Office on February 6, 2023. He also contacted First National Bank of Kerrville, where the Donovan family had banked since 1971, where every major transaction of our parents' lives had passed through, and spoke to the branch manager, a man named Gerald Huff who had known my father personally, and explained the situation in full. Gerald Huff was appalled in a specifically Texan way, quiet, still, with a kind of compressed fury that comes from someone who takes institutional integrity very personally. He asked what we needed from the bank. Roy told him. And then Roy told me. Damon hasn't deposited the check yet, Roy said. Gerald thinks he'll come in within the next 2 weeks, a check that large can't sit forever. When he does, Gerald will call us first. And Claire, this is your call, not mine, but if you want to be there, Gerald says you're welcome to wait in his office. I thought about my father. The fence he'd built before the cattle got out. I'll be there, I said. Part 4, Preparation. Gerald Huff called me on a Tuesday morning in February at 7:42 a.m. He just called to confirm branch hours, Gerald said. I'd say he'll be here before noon. I was in my truck in 20 minutes. I want to describe what I brought with me to that bank, because it matters. I brought the folder Roy had assembled, Dr. Marsh's forensic report. The notary's signed cooperation statement. The sheriff's report number from the criminal complaint Roy had filed. A copy of the original joint ownership deed from my father's estate. A copy of my father's will and its specific language about requiring both signatures for any property transfer. I also brought something that wasn't in any legal file. I brought a photograph. It was taken in the summer of 2019, a few months after my mother died. It was the last time Damon and I had both been at the ranch at the same time, before everything got complicated. We were standing on the porch of the main house, squinting into the afternoon sun, and my father had taken the photo because he said we never had enough pictures of just the two of us. I don't know exactly why I brought it. I think I needed to remember, before whatever happened next, that Damon had once been just my brother. Not a forger, not a thief, not the person who'd sold the house where our parents were buried without asking me. Just my brother, squinting into the sun. I put it in the folder. Under everything else. Gerald Huff was a steady, gracious man who brought me coffee and asked about the ranch with genuine interest while we waited. He'd been at the bank for 28 years. He'd processed my father's cattle sale proceeds, my parents' mortgage payoff, the estate accounts after both of their deaths. He had the particular institutional loyalty to long-standing customers that you find in small-town banks and almost nowhere else. Your daddy was a good man, he said at one point, not as a filler comment but as a statement he wanted me to have. He was, I said. He'd be furious about this, Gerald said. He'd be quiet about it, I said. That was always scarier. Gerald almost smiled. At 11:47 a.m., Gerald's assistant knocked softly on the office door and gave him a look. He's here, Gerald said. I stood up. Part 5, Revenge. I positioned myself just inside the glass partition of Gerald's office, where I could see the main lobby clearly. The door was slightly open. Damon walked through the main entrance wearing a blue button-down and dark jeans, and he had the particular walk of a man who is trying to appear casual while carrying something that is making him extremely nervous. The check was in a manila envelope under his arm. He went to the teller line. There were 2 people ahead of him. He checked his phone twice. Gerald stepped out of his office and approached the head teller, said something quietly, and the head teller looked up at Damon and said, clearly, "Sir, for a transaction of this size, I'll need to get the branch manager involved. Would you mind stepping over here?" Damon turned to follow the teller's gesture toward Gerald's office. That's when he saw me. I was standing in the open doorway of the office, and I had the folder in my left hand, and I was looking directly at him. He stopped. The manila envelope slipped from under his arm and hit the floor, and the check slid out of it and skittered a few inches across the tile, and for a moment that felt much longer than it actually was, the 2 of us looked at each other across the lobby of the bank our father had used for 40 years. Damon's face went through several things. Shock first, genuine, physical shock, the kind that drains color from a person's face in real time. Then something that might have been calculation, a rapid internal assessment of what this meant, what I knew, what he could still salvage. And then, underneath everything, something that was almost relief, the way people sometimes look when a thing they've been dreading finally arrives and the waiting is over. He bent down and picked up the check. He walked toward me slowly. "Claire," he said. "Damon," I said. "How did you," he started. "Roy Tipton," I said. "And Gerald. And a forensic document examiner in San Antonio named Dr. Sylvia Marsh, who has a very good eye for signature inconsistencies." He looked at the folder in my hand. "Is that everything?" I said. "The forensic report. The notary's statement, he's cooperating, Damon, full cooperation. The sheriff's report. Roy filed it 2 weeks ago. There's an active criminal complaint." Damon sat down in one of the lobby chairs, heavily, the way a man sits when his legs stop being entirely reliable. He looked, for just a moment, like the boy in the photograph. Older and worn and not wearing it well, but somewhere underneath all of it, still the person who had stood at my mother's grave. "I needed the money," he said. It was not an excuse, exactly. It was just the truth, stated plainly, and for once in my life I believed Damon was telling me the complete truth about something. "I know," I said. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I was going to give you your share." "Damon," I said, quietly, "you forged my name. You hired someone to pretend to be me. You sold the land where Mama and Daddy are buried without asking me." He looked at the floor. "Was I ever going to find out?" I asked. "If the letter hadn't come to the ranch by mistake? If Meridian hadn't sent it to my address instead of through you?" He didn't answer. That was its own answer. I sat down across from him. "Here is what's going to happen," I said. "Roy has already spoken to the DA's office in Kerrville. Given your cooperation and the fact that no money has actually changed hands yet, you haven't deposited this check, your hands are clean of this check as of this moment, there is a path here that doesn't end with you in Huntsville. But it requires you to do exactly what Roy says, starting today, starting now." "What does Roy want?" he said. "Full restitution. The sale gets unwound. Meridian's attorneys have already been notified of the fraudulent closing and they're holding the transaction in escrow pending resolution. The ranch comes back to joint ownership. And then we go to mediation and figure out what to actually do with it, together, with both signatures, the way Daddy intended." Damon looked up at me. "You're not sending me to prison," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm giving you the choice to not go to prison," I said. "That's different. You still have to answer to the DA. You still have to make this right with Roy and with the court. But if you cooperate fully, starting right now, today, Roy thinks you're looking at deferred adjudication rather than prosecution. Probation. A record that can be expunged if you complete it clean." "Why?" he said. "After what I did. Why not just?" "Because you're my brother," I said. "And because Daddy didn't build that ranch so his kids could destroy each other over it." I reached into the folder. Underneath everything else, underneath Dr. Marsh's report and Terry Bowles' statement and the sheriff's report number, I pulled out the photograph. I put it on the lobby chair between us. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put his head in his hands, and he cried in a way I hadn't seen since the morning after our father died, real, wretched, past the point of performance crying, the kind that comes from somewhere a person usually keeps locked. I let him. Gerald Huff appeared in the office doorway, saw us, and quietly withdrew. After a while, Damon wiped his face with the back of his hand and looked at me. "What do I do first?" he said. "Call Roy," I said. "His number is in the folder. He's expecting your call." Part 6, The Final Consequence. Damon called Roy from the bank parking lot that afternoon. The process that followed was neither fast nor simple, but it moved in a straight line once Damon stopped fighting it, which was immediately. The sale to Meridian Land Group was unwound within 30 days, with the cooperation of their attorneys. They had no interest in holding a property acquired through fraudulent documentation, and their title insurance company was, if anything, more motivated than anyone else to unwind the deal cleanly. The earnest money and all associated funds were returned to escrow and the transaction was voided. The Donovan Ranch came back to joint ownership, exactly as our fathers will had intended. The Kerr County DA's office, presented with Damon's full cooperation, his voluntary return of the proceeds check, and Roy's documentation of the corrective actions taken, agreed to deferred adjudication, a formal legal process in Texas that allows first-time felony offenders who plead guilty and complete a supervision period to avoid a formal conviction on their record. Damon would serve 3 years of probation, with regular reporting requirements and a prohibition on any real estate transactions during that period. Terry Bowles, the notary, received a separate administrative action. His notary commission was revoked by the Texas Secretary of State's office and he faced civil liability from the title company, whose underwriter had taken the largest immediate financial hit from the voided transaction. The real estate broker, Philip Graves, faced a complaint before the Texas Real Estate Commission for facilitating a transaction where ownership documentation should have raised red flags. His license was suspended pending investigation. In March of 2023, Damon and I sat across from a mediator in Roy Tipton's conference room and had the conversation we should have had 2 years earlier, when he first asked about selling. I told him the truth. I didn't want to sell the ranch. It was my home, my livelihood, the place where our parents were buried, and the thought of it becoming a hunting resort for Dallas investors made me physically ill. He told me the truth. He was in serious financial trouble, business debts, personal debts, the accumulated wreckage of 15 years of almost successful ventures, and his half of the ranch's value was the only significant asset he had. We found a solution that Roy had actually suggested early in the process, before any of the forgery had come to light, back when Damon's first sale inquiries had seemed like something that could be handled reasonably. I bought Damon out. Not at the $2.3 million sale price. A new appraisal, ordered for mediation, came in at $2.1 million, and Damon's 50% was $1.05 million. I secured a ranch equity loan against the property, paid Damon his share over an 18-month structured disbursement that Roy built safeguards into, and became the sole owner of the Donovan Ranch. It cost me. The loan payments are significant, and ranching is not a business that generates the kind of cash flow that makes a 7-figure loan comfortable. But I manage. I've managed harder things. The hunting lease is doing well. I added a small glamping operation on the eastern acreage in the fall of 2023 that has exceeded every revenue projection I made for it. There are people from Austin and San Antonio who drive 2 hours to sleep under the hill country sky, which I understand completely. Damon finished the first year of his probation clean. We talk occasionally, careful, cautious conversations that are building something, slowly, toward whatever our relationship is going to be from here. It is not what it was. It may never be. But it is something. He came to the ranch in November of last year, just to visit, just to walk the land. I wasn't sure how it would feel to have him there after everything. But we walked the North Ridge at dusk, the way we used to as kids, and stood at our parents' graves while the sun went down behind the Cedar Hills, and he said something I think our father would have recognized. "I'm sorry, Claire," he said. Just that. No qualifier, no explanation, no performance. Just the words. "I know," I said. We stood there a while longer, until the stars came out, that hill country sky that people drive 2 hours to see, and then we walked back down to the house and I made coffee and we sat on the porch the way we used to. The photograph is back on the wall inside. The ranch is mine. And my father's fence is holding.